We're getting ready for week 2 of the fantasy season, and I know you are too. It's time to look at the wide receiver position and decide who makes the lineup and who sits on the bench. We're going to go through every game and talk about all the receivers that might matter for fantasy to help you out. And when it's time to set your lineups, these guys have to be in there. These are must starts at wide receiver. Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, and Cooper Kupp. And before you go to set those fantasy lineups, don't forget to set your pick'ems for this coming week on Underdog. If you haven't tried it yet, this is still a great time to do that because new customers who sign up using promo code ENDGAME, you get this new customer special, Josh Allen just needing 1 yard on Thursday night. That's right, if Josh Allen just gets higher than 0.5 total yards on Thursday night, you win that pick and you just need to combine it with any other pick, which we're going to give you some of our favorite picks at RB in this video. You also still get 50% deposit match up to $1,000 in bonus cash if you sign up now. Just make sure you use code ENDGAME when you sign up on Underdog. All right, let's start with that Thursday matchup. The Bills at the Dolphins. Josh Allen got a few options to throw to. One of them is Khalil Shakir, who did find the end zone in week 1. Is he startable in fantasy?
This is such a tough wide receiver room to figure out. I mean, look, the Dolphins secondary did not look very good last week against the Jaguars, but at the same time, who is the guy here? I'm going to put Shakir as a flex because he could score again.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of aggravating. There is no clear number 1, number 2, 3 receiver. Who knows? I mean, Shakir could have value or he could do nothing, so agree. Flex option, and that's it. Now let's talk about the rookie, Keon Coleman. Did catch a few balls down the field. Not a big game, but not bad for a debut. Can he do something against the Dolphins?
Again, I think he can do something this week. It's like the Dolphins secondary did not look very good last week, but again, I can't say like a strong start or I feel good starting him, but he's got flex appeal.
Well, he does have not only the ability to get those downfield balls, but also a big red zone target. Hey, you never know when a touchdown is in store, but I will say this. I have not been big on Coleman, but he exceeded my expectations in week 1 against this Dolphins defense. He could probably do even better. If nothing else, I'm looking at Underdog and those pick'ems we just talked about. Right now, 38.5 receiving yards for Coleman. Why can't he do that? If he did it last week, he can do it again. I'm going to go ahead and take the higher on Keon Coleman on Underdog. And if you pair that with that Josh Allen pick, you get them together, that could be an easy win for your first time doing NFL pick'ems in Underdog. But of course, you've got to sign up first. If you haven't done that yet, make sure you use that promo code ENDGAME to take advantage of that new customer special plus everything else that they have to offer. And then there's also Curtis Samuel. Very quiet in the first game as a Buffalo Bill. Does he do something that might put him on the radar this week?
No, I mean, like they told us he was fine, the toe wasn't an issue, and then he went out there and barely played. I got to think the toe is still an issue. I'm not starting Curtis Samuel.
No, we've got to see that number 1, he's healthy. Number 2, he's actually involved in this offense. A lot of potential mouths to feed here. I'll just keep him on the bench. And then I imagine in most leagues, regardless of the matchup, you're starting Jalen Waddle. Is that true here?
Yeah, I don't really know how you'd be benching Jalen Waddle. A very strong start this week.
Right. And I will say Buffalo, I mean, you'd think strong defense. I don't think their pass defense will be nearly as good as it was last year, so Waddle is totally fine to start. All right, on Sunday, start with the 49ers at the Vikings. Well, let's talk Brandon Ayuk. Very quiet on Monday night, as predicted, but does he do better in this matchup?
I'm sure he will. I mean, now he should be, play his full number of snaps. It's a much better matchup against the Vikings. I think this week I feel very confident in Brandon Ayuk. He's a strong start.
Right. We knew that this could happen week 1, get off to that sluggish start. Week 2 and on, pretty much, you shouldn't have to think too hard. You can start him here. Now, Deebo Samuel, this is interesting because with CMC out, he was used a lot as a runner on Monday night. And it sounds like they might need him again in week 2. Does that make Deebo an auto start?
I don't know about an auto start, but again, I don't really see how you're benching Deebo Samuel, especially if Christian McCaffrey is out again. But either way, I think Deebo Samuel a strong start.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's pretty close to a must start because look at what you got him in round 2 or 3. You should be starting him anyways. And again, if he's got that rushing upside now, actually scoring from the backfield, yeah, just put him in your lineup. And of course, Justin Jefferson is a no-brainer, but Jordan Addison not so much, and now has an ankle issue he's dealing with. If he's good to go, which is possible, do you put him in your lineup?
And against this 49ers defense with maybe a bum ankle, no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of down on Addison anyways. I mean, let's acknowledge Sam Darnold is not quite Kirk Cousins, but also Addison is in a tough spot with a bum ankle. I'll pass. Seahawks taking on the Patriots on the road. Well, Seahawks' new air attack didn't really look that different from the old one. Let's see, are there better days ahead for DK Metcalf starting in week 2?
I mean, it'll probably be better than last week, but I don't love this matchup this week. So I think he'll be better. I still would have a hard time benching him. So I don't totally love him this week, but I still think he's a solid start.
Well, I'll say I think DK Metcalf is going to be a good buy low candidate after this week because I don't think he's going to do much again. Patriots have new cornerback Christian Gonzalez, looked really good in week 1. Might lock down DK again, just like Surtain did last week. So I can't say you have to bench him, but I think he's just a flex. And then Jackson Smith and Jigma, so much for having a bigger role, getting more involved. Very quiet week 1. Some people are even dropping him. How far do you go?
I'm not dropping him, but I'm also not starting him.
Agree. If I'm worried about DK, I'm worried about JSN. I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring game in general, so he's just someone to bench. Although I'm not dropping him if I can help it. And then, of course, Tyler Lockett, questionable heading into the game, led the team in receptions and yards. Is Lockett a flex option?
Yeah, that's where I'd put him. He's a flex option. I mean, I don't know if he has a ton of upside, but you can flex him.
I guess you can flex him, but I'm also not convinced he's the number 1 receiver in this team, so flex option just like the other 2. And then for New England, is there really any receiver that's even worth talking about individually? Any chance you can consider a Pats wideout?
No chance I'm starting any Patriots receiver right now.
No, I mean, the fact that we can't even decide if there's anyone to talk about tells you enough. Giants at the Commanders this week. Let's rip the Band-Aid off here. Malik Neighbors, he's still going to have to try to catch passes from Daniel Jones. I mean, he wasn't bad in his first debut as an NFL rookie, but can things get better because of this matchup?
That's the thing. It's the Commanders. I mean, this is it, right? This is the week. I mean, I guess they're going to play each other again later in the season, but this is the week where it's like, okay, you got to start Neighbors pretty much because this defense is terrible. So despite having Daniel Jones, I'm going to say this week, Malik Neighbors is a strong start.
Still down on him in terms of, well, not living up to expectations for those reasons, but yeah, he still has upside. Look, he could just house one on his own, even if he doesn't get the ball where it's supposed to be. So risky, but enough upside, I'll start him. And then I did talk up Wan'Dale Robinson because he led the team in targets. Sure, they're all really short targets, but is that worth something?
It's worth a flex in like a PPR league. I wouldn't flex him in a non-PPR league, and even in half PPR, I'd be a little nervous, but he's a flex in a PPR league.
I think that's fair. Again, based on this matchup against that horrible Commanders secondary, getting the targets, he could house one too. He's really fast, so if you need some upside in a PPR league, you can flex him. Now, Terry McLaurin, one of the bigger disappointments, to be honest, not his fault necessarily. Do things get better in week 2?
I mean, it is a Giant, so that's nice. And look, he did just miss a deep connection with Jaden Daniels, so there was a potential there. But also, the way they're using this offense right now is not great for fantasy and for the passing game. I'm going to sadly have to put Terry McLaurin as just a flex this week.
Well, that's the thing. Again, it's not Terry's fault, and Jaden Daniels will have better days. Of course, he's going to continue to grow, but is the play calling really going to favor McLaurin? I don't know. I mean, I think you can still consider him a wide receiver 3 because I think they'll try to get him more involved, but just you got to acknowledge the risk.
Do you want to get advice from Pierre and myself at the tip of your fingertips? Start sit, waiver wire, trades, and more? Well, you can do all of this and more on our new app, Draft Lane. We have the ability to view your roster, waivers, and more to give you the right feedback to make the perfect choice. Download Draft Lane from the App Store or Google Play now to connect with Pierre and myself anytime, anywhere.
Chargers going to take on the Panthers in week 2. Maybe not the most dynamic aerial attack from either of these teams, but there could be some value in a guy like Ladd McConkey. He did score his first NFL touchdown last week against the Panthers defense, which got steamrolled last week. Do you have more interest in McConkey?
I mean, sure, because of the matchup, but this Chargers offense is only going to really throw when they have to. But like the Panthers made Derek Carr look like the MVP. So if you want to flex Ladd McConkey, sure, but it's risky.
I actually am kind of growing on McConkey as a potential number 3 receiver because he's probably going to have a floor based on the way that receiving room looks. And in this matchup, could have a ceiling, at least a small ceiling as well. So I wouldn't say you have to start him, but I think he's definitely startable in a 12-teamer. Josh Palmer was very quiet in week 1. Anything better because of the matchup in week 2?
I mean, maybe because of the matchup, but you're banking on a touchdown here pretty much. I'm not starting Josh Palmer.
Yeah, I feel he's more of a deep shot, big play, dependent type of receiver, so risky flex that you shouldn't need. And then there's Quentin Johnson. If you get 1 point, he might have been leading the team in receiving yards, which is not worth very much, but any hope for QJ here?
No hope. Not starting him.
I'm definitely not starting him and still not rostering him. Now for Carolina, besides the fact that pretty much everything was a massive disappointment, there's Deontay Johnson. Thought at least volume would get him by, and it didn't. Does he rebound?
I mean, let's hope so. That was pretty bad, but look, I don't feel comfortable putting Deontay Johnson in my lineup after what we saw last week. Let me see it first.
Yeah, I really thought he would be startable early in the season even. We need to see something first, right? So sadly, you probably should just bench Deontay until further notice. And then the rookie Xavier Leggett did get someone involved, but this is probably going to be a pass.
Yeah, if I can't start Deontay, I can't really start Leggett. Pass in here too.
The Saints going to take on the Cowboys this week. Now, despite the fact that the Saints were just all over the Panthers, somehow Chris Olave did nothing. What do you do with Chris Olave this week?
I roll him back out there. I mean, it was a weird game. They had 30 points in the middle of the second quarter. Rashid Shaheed, Foster Moreau, and I think Juwan Johnson. Is that who scored the touchdowns? I mean, yeah, like Chris Olave will be fine. I'm starting him.
Look, this is the type of receiver you get with Olave. He'll have some big plays and big games, and then he'll have some duds, right? He'll bounce back. You take a chance on him. You start him unless you just happen to be stacked at receiver. Now, Rashid Shaheed did do something. In fact, he was the first scorer, I think, in the league in week 1. But is this too risky?
It's pretty risky because, I mean, without that long touchdown, what did you really get from Rashid Shaheed? And what are you really going to get from Rashid Shaheed? So I think it's still too risky. I'm not starting him.
Well, again, you know what Shaheed is. It's going to be exactly what he's been. A guy who can either go for a big, long touchdown like he did last week or give you very little. So if you need that upside, you can roll him out. And Brandon Cooks, chance to face off against one of his former teams. Did score last week. Can he do it again?
I mean, he can always do that, but outside of that, what are you really getting from Brandon Cooks? And this is not a good matchup. Again, not a good matchup. So touchdown or bust here. I'm not going to start Brandon Cooks if I can help it.
Well, I feel a little better about Cooks because I feel like he's always at least in the flex conversation. I mean, he's the number 2 receiver in Dallas. They just lost Jake Ferguson, at least for a short time. I mean, the Saints defense isn't bad, but, I don't think they're going to shut him out. So I think Cooks at least has a pretty solid floor as a flex. Next up is the Colts at the Packers. Let's talk Michael Pittman, another guy that underwhelmed in week 1. Does he get better in Green Bay?
I got to imagine he does. I don't think we're going to see Alec Pierce and Ashton Dulin have 2 huge touchdowns again. I think Anthony Richardson he might not need to throw it more because I don't know if this Packers offense without Jordan Love can force him to throw. But I think we see a better Michael Pittman this week, a strong start.
Yeah, you still got to put him in there. Maybe this won't be his best week because, Packers defense isn't bad. Might not be a high-scoring game, but Pittman should at least have a lot of targets. I tend to chase target volume, so I'll still start Pittman. Then the rookie, A.D. Mitchell, nearly made some big plays. He was overshot just a couple of times. Do you take a swing on it connecting this week?
This is still very risky. I would prefer not to.
Yeah, I agree. This is a type of, chance, the type of flyer you really shouldn't need when there's no bye weeks, not that many injuries. So no, you should just keep him on your bench. And then there is Alec Pierce. Huge game, 125 yards, a touchdown, 2 deep shots that did connect. You think lightning strikes twice?
Probably not. I mean, you want to roll the dice, go for it. I think it's too risky here. I'm not starting him.
Well, look, there's a reason why that was his best game ever. This happens once in a while. He'll make those long plays. I'm not counting on it happening again. Don't get tricked into starting Alec Pierce. Now, I imagine if you have Jaden Reed, you're going to want to start him after last week. Chris, is he just a lock?
Well, I mean, he probably would be if Jordan Love was starting, but are we getting Malik Willis, Ryan Tannehill? I mean, you probably are going to have a hard time benching Jaden Reed, but I'm only going to put him as a flex this week.
Well, he is the one Packer receiver where I feel like you can still start him because he is a guy who will be used in the backfield on those jet sweeps, those short slants, and they'll try to get the ball in his hands. So I do think Jaden Reed is at the very worst a number 3 receiver in 12-team leagues, so I'm pretty much starting him if I got him. Now, Christian Watson is a different story. Where does he fall for you without Jordan Love?
I mean, I can barely flex Jaden Reed. I can't start Christian Watson without Jordan Love.
Yeah, it hurts to say, but all that upside doesn't amount to much because just don't know if he's going to get the ball in his hands enough, so you probably just need to sit Watson. And then probably the same goes for Romeo Doubs. What do you think?
Yeah, I cannot start Romeo Doubs with whoever is a Green Bay quarterback.
Agreed. Doubs, stash him, keep him for later in the season, but don't start. Cleveland Browns traveling to Jacksonville this week. Let's start with Amari Cooper. Definitely not his favorite week, and not yours if you started him. So, does he and Deshaun Watson get much better in week 2?
I mean, they've got to at least get better. He did have a play where he probably should have caught it and scored a touchdown, to be honest. So I think the potential is there. I mean, he's risky, but I still think he's, startable this week.
I mean, we see the risk is that he does what he did in week 1. Again, it was a lot Watson's fault, but he missed some opportunities as well. I don't really want to start him if I don't have to, but, we don't always have the luxury of having, a bunch of stud receivers. So for the most part, you're probably starting him and taking a chance. And I know some people will ask, Jerry Jeudy, he scored. Is he startable now?
I mean, did he even catch another pass outside of that touchdown? No, I'm not starting Jerry Jeudy.
No, definitely not starting Jerry Jeudy. Don't get swayed just because he found the end zone. All right, now on to Jacksonville's receiving core. Let's talk about Christian Kirk. And he bounced back from kind of a lackluster week 1 himself.
Yeah, 2 years in a row, 1 catch in week 1, but I think he can bounce back. It's not the best matchup here against Cleveland, of course, but I'm still going to trust Christian Kirk. I think he's startable.
Yeah, I think we learned with Kirk the past 2 seasons, it's going to be a roller coaster. You keep him in there so you don't miss out on the potential big game. So I'm pretty much starting him where I got him. Now, the rookie Brian Thomas Jr. looked really good in his debut, caught a touchdown, also stretched the field. Where do you think he falls?
Again, I mean, looked good in week 1. It's not a great matchup, but I mean, if I'm going to start Christian Kirk, I can't say no to Brian Thomas Jr., who was better last week, so he's startable.
He is at least in the flex conversation for me. Again, not a sure thing. This Cleveland defense is pretty good in general. Don't know who Denzel Ward is going to wind up locking onto, but look, Thomas obviously has that big play, home run hitting ability, so you could flex him if you need it. And then there's good old Gabe Davis. Hey, Gabe was pretty involved last week. Is he on the flex radar?
Nah, I'm still not doing it with Gabe Davis.
I didn't think so, and no, I'm not either. Next, we got the Jets at the Titans. Well, of course, Garrett Wilson is a must start. But of course, the leading receiver for the Jets in their opener was Allen Lazard. That's right, that Allen Lazard. 2 touchdowns, 89 yards. Do we have to consider him not just as a waiver wire pickup, but maybe a streamer?
I think you do. I mean, at least as a flex, he's going to have chances to score. I mean, 9 targets in this game, only 2 less than Garrett Wilson. Not the best matchup, but I think as a flex, you can consider him.
I don't want to fall into this trap, but I mean, look, who else is he going to throw to besides those 2, Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard? The tight end, Conklin, was barely involved. No other receiver even got targeted. I would prefer not to start him in week 2, but you could stash him. There's Mike Williams, although he was pretty much invisible on Monday night. Can you even consider Mike Williams at this point?
No, you got to wait till this guy is playing more snaps. You cannot start Mike Williams.
Yeah, look, I wasn't drafting Mike Williams. I wouldn't even consider starting him in a deep league. On the Tennessee side, Calvin Ridley, I guess the new number one there, did a little something in week 1. Could he do anything against the Jets in week 2?
I don't think so. He's going to get the sauce treatment more than likely. I mean, Will Levis still out here making like these weird, like, what are you thinking plays? I'm not starting Calvin Ridley again this week.
Yeah, I'm mostly in on this Tennessee offense being good throughout the year. I'm not in on them against the Jets this week. I need to see it. Need some time for that chemistry to develop, so I'm going to sit Ridley. And then there's DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, I know he was still kind of limited physically. Any hope this week?
No, even if they told me he's full, good to go, I'm not starting DeAndre Hopkins against the Jets.
Yeah, no way you can start him. And if we're out on Ridley, you got to be out on D-Hop. Bucks going to take on the Lions in Detroit. I think it's safe to say Mike Evans, you just keep him in your lineup. Chris Godwin, is he in that territory as well with this matchup?
I mean, you got to be feeling good about Chris Godwin again. This Lions secondary, as I predicted, still not looking very good. So Chris Godwin, a very strong start this week.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's anywhere I have Godwin that I'm not starting him. Against Detroit, yeah, just keep him locked in your lineup. And then they've got a viable number 3 receiver, finally, Jalen McMillan, the rookie. We heard a lot about him in the preseason. He found the end zone, almost found it twice last week. I mean, Detroit, this defense, could you consider flexing him?
I mean, if you're looking for touchdown upside, sure, but like Detroit's defense is bad, but they're not Commanders level bad. I'm gonna probably bench him this week.
Well, that's true. I mean, yeah, it would have to be, again, a pretty deep league, maybe a dynasty league, maybe a non-PPR league. You shouldn't have to go this deep, although he is an interesting flyer. And then Detroit finally has a viable number 2 receiver after the Sun God. His name is Jameson Williams, and this is probably why he was a very high draft pick a couple of years ago. Is this repeatable, or at the very least, is it time to just put him in your fantasy lineup and see what happens?
I think it is. I mean, he's got weekly upside. Is he going to do what he did last week again? Probably not, but could he be involved? Could he, be good for your fantasy team? I think so. So I'm going to view him as an upside flex.
I'm definitely in on him. Now, I can't say you have to start him. This really depends who else you got. Probably you have at least 2, maybe 3 receivers that you like better than him, but hey, feel free to start him wherever you can fit him in. Raiders at Ravens. Let's start with Devontae Adams. Few catches, some yards. Gets the Ravens on the road, though. I don't know. What do you think about Devontae?
I mean, I've been saying what I think about Devontae all off season. I still feel the same way about Devontae Adams. I mean, he'll probably be okay. Yeah, you probably are starting him, but you're probably not going to love it.
Well, this may sound odd, but in this really tough matchup against the Baltimore defense, I kind of feel better about him. They didn't really need to sling it, air it out last week because it was a close game with the Chargers. They might have to play catch-up in this game, to be honest, so I still think if I had Devontae Adams, I'm pretty much just starting him. And then there's Jacoby Myers. I'll admit, not quite the same thing. I think you can flex him, but are you even that high on him?
Yeah, risky flex here. Very risky.
Now for Baltimore, there's Zay Flowers. Not a great showing in week 1. Is he still a strong start?
I think he is. I mean, look, everything was there for him in week 1 except the results. If he's going to get that kind of usage again against the Raiders, he's going to have much better results. Strong start this week.
Definitely a strong start at Zay Flowers. I'm keeping him locked in, and I'll even discuss that more in a different video. And then what about Rashad Bateman? Is this the breakout week?
Probably not. I'm not starting Rashad Bateman.
I mean, it's got to happen at some point, right? Nah. I mean, look, you want to stash him and see what happens, sure, but don't start him. All right, now this will be an interesting one. The Rams taking on the Cardinals. So we know Puka Nacua on IR will be out at least 4 games. So that means Cooper Kupp is a lock. No doubt about it. But what happens now with a guy like Demarcus Robinson? Do you consider him in your lineup because he's basically the number 2 guy?
I think you have to. I think he's a flex option. I'm not going to say like, yeah, start him for sure, but I think as a flex option, he'll do just fine.
I do think you have to consider, even though he wasn't technically the number 2 receiver in week 1, it's fine. He should still be the guy. He has upside, so you can start him, especially if you're missing Puka. Now for Arizona, we legitimately have to ask what is going on, because the number 1 receiver drafted, generational talent Marvin Harrison Jr., was absolutely invisible, at least according to Kyler Murray. Didn't seem to see him on the field. Can we trust Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I am. I'm trusting him again this week. Look, Jameson Williams just torched this secondary. Why can't Marvin Harrison? And I got to think after last week, the Cardinals are probably going to make an effort to just get him the ball. So I'm rolling with Marvin Harrison Jr. again this week.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. I'm not sure what the thinking was there. I mean, you've got to think they at least throw it to him a few times. So I don't feel great, but I think for the most part, you got Harrison, you're starting him and take what you get. Instead, Kyler did seem to favor Greg Dortch. I mean, got a lot more targets than Harrison. Is Dortch also viable?
I mean, if you're looking for a floor flex play in PPR, sure, but that's about it.
I mean, he does seem to have some value, but again, at this point, why are you going to Greg Dortch in your lineup? Did your receiving room get that decimated by injuries already? You can flex him if you really need him. And then what about a guy like Michael Wilson?
I mean, he scored that touchdown, but I mean, really, what else? Like, I can't do it with Michael Wilson yet.
Yeah, same thing. This is a guy you should only need in desperation, heavy bye weeks, and this is not it. All right, Bengals at the Chiefs. Well, I guess if there's one good thing for Cincinnati is that Jamar Chase did play. I mean, you should still be putting him in your lineup. What about T. Higgins? This is assuming he's even cleared to play at all.
As long as he's practicing and not on the injury report, I'm going to start T. Higgins. But this is like one of those things, game time decision or all that. Nah, I'll pass. But if he's good to go, I'll play him.
I'm probably not, and this is not just because I'm sick and tired of the T. Higgins experience. It's, how it is. When he's not 100,000% healthy, he doesn't really perform well. The Chiefs are a tough secondary. I'm probably just going to sit it out another week, even if he doesn't. And then if Higgins doesn't play, are we going to fall into the Yoshi trap again and start Andre Yosevich?
I didn't fall for it last week, and I'm certainly not falling for it again this week.
Absolutely not. Now, Rashee Rice seems like a pretty strong start.
Yes, I think Rashee Rice at this point, I mean, if you got Rashee Rice, you're starting him. He's a very strong start.
Now, a lot of people want to start Xavier Worthy, the rookie, after he scored twice in the opening game. But are you going there?
I mean, the upside is there, but also the usage was not there. Like, sure, he scored on 2 big plays, but if he doesn't score on 2 big plays, you're not getting a whole lot. So if you want to gamble on him as a flex, go ahead.
Well, I'll say this kind of depends on the next player we're going to talk about. I think Worthy is definitely going to have upside. He's always going to have touchdown upside every week. But look, if Hollywood is still out, I think Worthy seems like a very good, at the very least, wide receiver 3. Now, what about Hollywood? If he comes back and plays, which is possible, we're hearing some optimistic reports, do you throw him in your lineup?
I think so. I mean, it was a shoulder injury. It's not like you have to worry about like his knee or his ankle re-aggravating it. I mean, I guess he could re-injure the shoulder on a tackle, but I'm willing to take that risk with Hollywood Brown in my lineup. I think he's startable.
Agree. If he's cleared, I think he's at the very least got some flex upside. This might not be a great week for him getting into the mix after missing some time, but he still definitely has potential. Steelers at the Broncos this week. There's one good thing, I guess, that Arthur Smith has done is it's simplified the start-sit decisions. There's only one receiver in Pittsburgh worth talking about, and that's George Pickens. What do you do with Pickens this week?
I mean, he was fine. I don't like the fact that he only played like 67% of the snaps. Like, what are we doing, Arthur Smith? But he's fine. I mean, whether it's Russ, whether it's Fields, he's startable.
I still think most weeks he will thrive in spite of Art. Not the best matchup because he's going to have Surtain on him, but I still think that he's at the very least a high upside flex. Now for Denver, not much of a passing game there just yet. What does that mean for Courtland Sutton this week?
I mean, on the plus side, he got a ton of targets. On the downside, I think he only caught like 4 passes. And this is the Steelers who looked great last week. I am not starting Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, it's going to take some time. Bo Nix to really get comfortable. This offense to click. So don't start Sutton if you can help it. Now we got the Bears at the Texans. Interesting matchup. We thought both these teams would have 3 fantasy viable receivers, but it's not looking that way for Chicago. So, let's start with DJ Moore. He's definitely going to be out there. How do you feel about him?
I mean, you can't feel great after last week, but you got to also feel like it can get better. So I think DJ Moore, I'm going to gamble on him again. I'm going to say he's startable.
Caleb Williams will develop. It might take a little time, of course, but DJ Moore, I do feel better about him this week based on the situation for the other two receivers, so I think DJ Moore is a pretty good start because of his projected target volume. Now, I say that because Keenan Allen did limp off the field last week. Not sure exactly what the situation is, but could be questionable. If he plays, would you give it a go?
I mean, on the good side, he got a ton of targets last week too. On the bad side, again, I like Sutton, only 4 catches, but he's involved. If he's healthy and good to go, I'll consider him a flex. But if he's, game time decision, I'm going to pass.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on Keenan Allen anyways because, again, I'm not convinced he's 100% anyways. It's not like it's a smash matchup, so I'd rather have him sit this one out, and even if he doesn't, I'll look elsewhere. Now, the Texans do have that big 3, so let's start with Nico Collins. Still looks like the alpha there and still looks like a great start.
Yeah, Nico Collins looks great. No reason to fade him. Very strong start.
Now, Stephon Diggs did score, not just once but twice in his Texans debut. Does that give you renewed confidence in Diggs?
I mean, I think it makes you feel like he's a flex because you look at outside those touchdowns, 5 yards per reception, 9 air yards? Like, you're not going to get a lot if he doesn't score a touchdown. So, for me, Diggs is just a flex.
I mean, every week in this offense, he will definitely be startable. Not going to be my favorite receiver necessarily, but for the most part, if you have Diggs, you can put him in there without any worry. Now, Tank Dell, a lot of people are worried because he didn't produce when the other two did. So is Tank Dell fallen off the map?
No, I actually like Tank Dell a lot. He was second on the team in targets, had well over 100 air yards. I mean, it just didn't connect last week. If it had, he would have had a huge game. I think Tank Dell, I think this could be the week where he has a huge game. I think he's a very strong start.
Yeah, I agree. At the very least, you can fit him in your flex. I mean, Tank Dell is still the same guy that CJ Stroud handpicked and loves to throw to, so don't fade Dell. And the week will end with Falcons at the Eagles. Gotta talk Drake London. Clearly one of the biggest busts from last week. Do you roll with him again?
I mean, I think for the most part you have to. It's like the Eagles secondary did not look good, so I'm not as worried about this defense as the Steelers defense. You got to think Cousins' offense will be better. I think you got to give Drake London another chance.
I'm going to give him another chance. Again, this Philly secondary does not look any better than last year so far. They're probably going to have to play catch up and throw the ball a lot. First start for Kirk Cousins with this new group. I'll give him a pass for last week and trust London this week. Now, number 2 receiver Darnell Mooney, that might be asking too much.
Yeah, again, he got a little involved, but not enough to start him, no.
And for the Eagles, of course, A.J. Brown just secured the fact that he is a must-start. Devontae Smith, I think, is pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. Had a nice game against the Packers last week. I'm not terrified of this Falcons secondary. Plus, A.J. Terrell probably going to be on A.J. Brown more than Smith. So, yeah, very strong start this week.
Yeah, most weeks, I'm not even questioning it. Devontae Smith this week, lock him in. Those are all the receivers you need to know about for week 2. Of course, we already covered running back and quarterback and tight end and everything else you need to win this week. Check it out in this playlist.